Well, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has asked the National Guard to step in after busloads of migrants sent to the nation's capital by Texas Governor Greg Abbott have sparked, quote, a humanitarian crisis. And Mayor Bowser isn't alone. New York City officials have also gone to the feds for help. News 4 New York reports that hundreds of migrants have arrived to the city with, quote, bogus paperwork, directing them to non-existent shelters with fake addresses, with fake phone numbers, leaving many migrants to wander the streets looking for help. It's infuriating to me, Ryan, that they are now claiming Greg Abbott has sparked, quote, a humanitarian crisis, when in fact it is the policies of the Biden administration, we'll probably disagree on this, but it is the policies of the Biden administration that have sparked a, quote, humanitarian crisis, because you have people taking treacherous journeys up through Central America, South America, Central America, up through Mexico, that are shepherded by cartels, every single one of them for the most part, paying the cartels to take these extremely dangerous journeys where they're often kidnapped, they're held for ransom, and it's all because they think, and they've told me this when I'm down there, that the Biden administration is going to be less drastic. That's one of the quotes from a Red Cross worker I spoke to in Matamoros, down in Tamaulipas in northern Mexico in June, less drastic than Donald Trump. And it's true that more people are getting across the border, especially with the news about the MPP program this week. More people are getting across the border under Biden. That means they call home and say, I got in. This is a good time to go. It travels like wildfire through WhatsApp and Facebook, and more people end up coming, and more people end up paying the cartels, more people end up in human hell on the way up to the border. That's the humanitarian crisis, and it's caused by policies that Muriel Bowser and Eric Adams support.
I mean, so there's a couple different layers to this. You know, the immigration did not stop under President Trump, though, because, you know, as you know, and you go down there, then the cartels are always going to have, you know, the cartel's business is to, you know, persuade people to try to make the journey to the United States. Our foreign policy over generations, you know, has created the conditions where it's pretty easy to persuade people that they want to make that journey. And so they're going to be, you know, feeding all sorts of, you know, propaganda and misinformation to people to say that, no, like here's why you need to go. Here's why under this particular Trump order, you know, the important time to go is now. You know, Trump's severe kind of COVID travel restrictions may be one of the only things that, you know, significantly did, you know, manage to kind of dampen the flow of migration. But nobody, I think, credibly thinks that is kind of a long-term solution. But to me, the other layer of it is I don't quite understand how we can have, on the one hand, this massive labor shortage where you walk around, you know, Washington, D.C., and you walk around New York City, and every single business has help wanted signs up, while at the same time, you know, just throwing our hands up and having, you know, no idea what to do, you know, with people who only want to find some gainful employment for themselves and their families. Like, how we have managed to make that a crisis is just mind-boggling to me.
Oh, it's absolutely ridiculous. There's no question about it, and it's because the policies are so unclear. And when they sort of go through, when migrants are processed through our facilities on the border, they come out with this paperwork that is no rhyme or reason behind it. It seems completely arbitrary as to who is able to work and who's not able to work. And the policies are so unclear about, you know, whether people can work, where they can work, how they get in, et cetera, that lots of people end up just disappearing into the shadows while they await asylum hearings. Most of them don't legally qualify for asylum because our asylum law is actually really narrow, and our laws about who can get in, whatever, it's constant flux through the court system, constant flux through the politics. So there's no clear messaging. And to your point, that's what the cartels capitalize on. Cartels are absolutely part of spreading this disinformation through the channels that go down Mexico, Central America, and the lack of clarity in our politics is what they are seizing on in order to do do that. And so, you can argue for a policy that's more similar to open borders. You can argue for a policy probably more similar to what I support, which is a very clear legal system that people can go through. So many people, I mean, you talk to people who've fled Cuba, who have been beaten by the police. Like, my God, I want an asylum system that helps them and that brings people like that into our country who need refuge. But our system is just so unclear that people like that are literally paying cartels to be shepherded through Nicaragua to the border. So it's an incredible lack of clarity, whether you think it should be more towards open borders or more towards something that's more restrictive. Because when you have a restricted system, this is just my personal perspective on it, it totally disincentivizes those dangerous journeys and doesn't line the pockets of cartels to the tune of billions a year, which every estimate suggests is what they're making on human smuggling, the plight of incredibly desperate people. So, either way, what we need in our system is clarity, and that's exactly what we don't have, and it's exactly what we're going further in the direction of not having.
Though if we had a more clear and fair and smooth system, then there wouldn't be a market, for these cartels. And I can already hear people saying, like, well, if you let these immigrants who are coming in have work visas, or allow them to legally work, then that's going to reduce wages. And we can't have that. And yes, on at an Econ 101 level, if you have a solid number of jobs, and you have an increasing number of job seekers, then by the laws of supply and demand, the wages being paid to those job seekers would go down. But that's not how it works, because the number of jobs we have is based on our rate of economic growth. And if you don't have enough workers to fill jobs, then you have lower economic growth. And so if you look at what's happened over the last year and a half, significantly as a result of these labor shortages, we've had kind of 9+% unemployment and GDP falling as a result of that. And so, yes, congratulations, you restricted the workforce. And so, wages have gone up 5-6%, but real wages have actually gone down because inflation has gone up higher. So you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. If you let more workers legally come in and work and have the legal protections that legal workers have, what you're going to do is create more jobs. You're going to grow the GDP, and as you create more jobs, that's the thing that is going to increase wages, because now you have more jobs, and so bosses then have to pay more in wages to get people to fill those jobs. And as the population ages around the globe, this is going to become kind of the most important question that countries face. Who can attract working age immigrants to come to their country to continue GDP growth, to support those older people. And it'll be people who can look past their kind of resentments and their grievances and actually see what a better world can look like that embraces more immigration. I'm pessimistic that we're going to be able to get there, though.
I mean, I just think there are so many communities in this country where people care a lot about the border, where they have gotten past resentments and grievances. If you look at in Minnesota, where so many Somali refugees were resettled. If you look at various pockets of the country where there have been, in Wisconsin, the Hmong refugees resettled in northern Wisconsin. But it's a question of just the insecurity at the border. It's a question of, I do think people legitimately in different economies, in the pre-pandemic economy, definitely had questions about the workforce. But we now, as millennials become a bigger part of the workforce, a very educated generation that doesn't want to do a lot of the jobs where there are openings. So yeah, it does need to adapt. And I guess the reason I feel like we've talked about this so much this summer is because I basically spent my entire summer in my little personal editing bay. I have no idea what I'm doing with Adobe Premiere, but I spent the summer basically editing hours of footage from our trip over at the Federalist down to northern Mexico in June, and we just released that documentary this week. So folks, while you're on YouTube, can check it out. It's called Cartel Country, the untold story of the black market on America's southern border. And it just, you hear the whole goal of it was to get the migrants themselves to talk about what's happening, to tell their stories, and to expose how they've been entirely commoditized by criminals and treated like cattle, basically, like inventory. Right. They get ID numbers. And we talked to one pastor down in Matamoros who's turned his Bible school into a shelter. He's been down there for 25 years. He's a Mexican immigrant to Brownsville, Texas himself. And he said, we regularly meet with the U.S. consulate. We tell them every single time, beg them, please put out a message in, quote, plain Spanish, telling people that if they come here, they can't just get in, and they never do it. So I think it's something to underscore the point about the lack of clarity. But again, that's called Cartel Country. You can watch it on YouTube. And it's so sad to see what's happening on both sides of the border, frankly, whether it's in New York, Washington, D.C., or down in northern Mexico, Central America.
Yeah, and those voices really need to be heard from. And I haven't seen I've seen clips of it, but I haven't seen the full documentary, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'll give you my Adobe criticisms when I finally watched it. Not that I'm any better at it.
Please let me know what you think of my graphic design. It's truly my passion. We'll be back with more Rising after this.